thank you all for coming in today, and I know you're in for a real treat. Kim has been a dear friend for a lot of years, and if you spend any time watching Volunteer Gardener or talk to the town, she also has her own YouTube channel now where she's getting ready to put out the second edition coming up. So Kim is, I think it's safe to say she has the gift of gab. More than that, she has a lot of experience, and we really enjoy her friendship and her contribution to the horticultural community. So, without further ado, Kim Bradley.
Thank you so much for showing up today. We're so excited to have you. A very brief bio on me. I am from Detroit, Michigan. I am a Yankee gardener. I learned to garden. I come from a long line of educators, social workers, doctors, and lawyers, and I'm the only one that chose to be a professional gardener. But all of the women in my family are wonderful, wonderful gardeners. As far as my home gardening experience goes, I have gardened in the city of Detroit, Michigan. I have gardened in Aiken, South Carolina. I've gardened in Sarasota, Florida, and I've gardened in Atlanta, Georgia, all different regions and different cold hardy zones, and a vast line of experience with that. I am a Tennessee Master Gardener. I took Master Gardeners in I got my Master Gardener certification in 1991. I'll be 50 years old in October. I became a professional landscaper in 1996, self-employed, and I have been ever since. But that said, Sarah Bates has put together something wonderful for us to begin talking about. Everything will apply to breaking up clay soil, which I think everybody is interested in today. So anyway, we'll start at the top, which basically topsoil. What is topsoil? Topsoil is basically the top 2 inches to the next 10 inches, the top 10 inches of soil. That's where all your nutrients lie. That's where the microorganisms are. And that's where the root system is going to get, again, the bulk of its nutrients and its water. One of the biggest mistakes in container gardening, tropical gardening, and gardening outside is too much water or not enough water. And so, of course, along with the nutrients, that's what role the soil plays. Being a master gardener and being a perennial specialist sounds very fancy, but I consider myself to be someone that farms worms. If I've got worms, I've got life. When I stick a shovel in the ground, I want worms to come up with it. If not, that's what I'm aiming at. I do highly promote soil testing. We'll talk about that in a bit and how to get your soil tested and places to get it tested. But I primarily go by the color and the texture of my soil. And of course, how many worms as my worms keep developing. I have found that as far as soil amendments go, leaf mold, which basically is decomposing leaves, of course. I like to shred them with a lawnmower in the fall, of course. I have found that as far as calling worms, it is one of the best things that I've learned. Even if you have a bag of leaves in your yard, you go in that some kind of way, the worms get into that bag. I don't know if you guys have ever noticed that before, but worms, it's all about worms for me. So leaves are one of my favorite amendments. Just FYI, we have the cicadas coming this year. I don't know if she's rolling her eyes. I don't know if anybody, have you guys experienced the cicadas before? So you know they're huge. But that's what they do. That's one of the Earth's ways of aerating itself is with things like cicadas. Worms also aerate the soil. And that is the problem with a compacted soil. Even if you have a soil that is very healthy in compost, organic matter, it can still become very compact. One of the things that I do and what I consider to be fine gardening is even if I have a quality soil, I break that soil up on a regular basis. So that in mind, that even if you have a healthy soil, you still do not want it to be compacted. Adding organic soil amendments to the soil lightens soil texture, discourages compaction, adds nutrients, improves drainage and aeration, moderates soil temperature, and provides pore space. which is essential to plant growth. Again, when planting, it's very important to compact your soil by hand, but not to make it brick form. And the reason for that is because even though you want oxygen in the soil, and I won't get too scientific, but even though you want air circulation in the soil, you don't want pockets. That's where ores, like rocks, for instance, can get in your way. They will create little air pockets, and that you don't want. You want the root system to be cozy, much like a comforter or a blanket would be to you. So keep that in mind when you are dealing with aeration in soil. The soil base in earth mix does have a heavy clay content. So if you have clay in your soil, know that it is a necessity. It gives you structure, it holds things together. The problem is when it doesn't have organic matter with it. So with that, I'm going to show you, and please feel free to break it up, a piece of that base that is an earth mix. It is river bottom topsoil. Yeah, we're going to plant the dirt. It's my favorite thing to do. Thanks, Dave. But as you'll see as you break it up, there are two things I would like for you to make note of. One is that it's heavy, and that is a sign of clay, of course. Also that even though I wouldn't even consider that to be slightly moist, it's dry, it crumples very easily. And that's what you want in your garden, for the soil to crumble very easily. So know that when you have soil, when you have clay, it is not a bad thing. It's not something that you want to get rid of completely, okay? Let's see, here is the rest of the earth mix. This is kind of heavy, you guys. I think I'm going to do this. Also, compost to be one of the best soil amendments. It also primarily has pine fines that can also be sold as soil conditioner. Usually when you buy it by the bag, it's called soil conditioner. It is finely ground pine bark. Wonderful stuff. Again, because it's slightly chunky, it will provide the air that you want in the soil. Know that, and it's in your handout, there's a distinct difference between pine fines and the nuggets that you may buy as a mulch. That's not something you want to amend your soil with. Okay, next, you guys, we have the pine fines themselves. Okay, again, the pine fines are a major component of the topsoil that is blended here. But these are the pine fines, and this is a really high quality pine fine. Often when you buy it in a bag at the box stores, you'll find that it's very light in color, which to me tells me that it's not broken down enough. I want things to be this color, and you'll notice that the earth mix blend and the pine fines are the same dark, rich brown color. So please pay attention to that. As far as soil conditioner goes, pine fines, it can also be used as a mulch. Often people will mulch with it. We'll talk about mulch in just a moment. If you do mulch with it, the good thing about that is that you can turn it under and condition your soil at the end of the growing season when it's time to put the gardens down for the winter. It adds acidity to the soil, so pine fines not so strongly that if you have things that don't like an acidic soil, that it will change the soil base tremendously. So please don't think that you can make a mistake by using it. But if you're growing azaleas, which love is an acidic soil, high pH balance, that's a great thing to mulch with. Organic materials, you don't want to use anything that ever had eyes, that ever made noise, or that has an oil base. So anything out of the kitchen. Coffee grounds are just wonderful, and as David can attest to, the coffee shops will give you coffee grounds. They need to get rid of them anyway. Coffee grounds add a great, great texture to the soil. So graciously this morning, do not work in clay soil when it is wet. That goes for the garden, period. Again, you will create clumps, you will create little bricks. Also, don't plant in a wet soil, in a saturated soil, whether it's a good soil or not, because you can actually suffocate your root systems. You can create funguses and disease from things being too wet. So I never ever plant in anything that is wet. Soil amendments can be used as a mulch and still work if you are in a position where you cannot mix the soil, which happens very often, say, in a foundation planting. Everything's established, your root systems are vulnerable, but if you take things like mushroom compost, earth mix, pine fines, and top dress them, which is basically putting 2 inches, I personally don't top dress above 4 inches from my topsoil layer. The reason for that is, number one, it takes longer to break down into the soil. 2, it again can form a barrier and block your water from getting down into the topsoil. So remember that. But, you know, especially with mushroom compost, often people will think that when you buy mushroom compost at the box stores, that you're getting a quality mushroom compost or that you are getting a quality soil. That is truly not the case with me. If I can't smell the compost, it doesn't have to be that strong, but if I can't smell it, then I don't feel like it's alive, if you will. I think it may be broken down a little bit too much, aged a little bit too much. You see the difference there? Can you smell it? That's good stuff, you guys. Decomposed plant material from just about any source can become an organic soil amendment. It is decomposed enough when you can no longer tell what it was. So say you take the broccoli stalks from the kitchen and put them in your compost pile. You know it's ready when you can't tell it was broccoli anymore. Okay, when you can't tell it was a tomato anymore. Also, eggshells, you guys. Eggshells, a great amender. Well-composed organic matter is black and crumbly, just like when we broke apart the earth mix. That's the exact same texture and what you're looking for in your compost, especially in your yard, and smells fresh and loomy. Examples of starting plant material include last fall's leaves. We talked about that, my absolute favorite. Spent mulch. Mulch that's been sitting in the yard for a year. It loses by that time. It's been bleached by the sun. It's starting to splinter and break apart. Great time to turn that under. I highly recommend waiting for a year on that though. Or the summer's bygone annuals or vegetable plants. Undecomposed organic matter is best thought of as a work in progress. Again, it will rob your soil of nutrients. For gardeners interested in improving their soil, if you can still tell what it is not decomposed enough. And you can tell when you have a lack of nitrogen because you don't have green. Nitrogen does many things, but if things are yellowing, often, like say you may have a Foster holly tree that has yellowing leaves. As always, there is an exception to the rule. Under decomposed organic matter can be tilled into the soil in the fall in preparation for spring planting. The winter will allow time for the under decomposed organic material to break down. Freezing and thawing cycles also help, so the winter works with you. Test your soil. We had a conversation on this earlier. Ellington Agricultural Center, which I am a big fan of them. They do a free soil testing, but it's very basic. When you are gathering soil to have it tested, by the way that I do it, I take a 5-gallon bucket and I will pull soil from various spots of that garden and fill that bucket halfway. So take some from the front of the garden, the back of the garden, the center, the left, the right. Blend all of that together so you have a good idea of what you have going on broadly within your soil. So, and UT, the UT Extension Service, which I believe they have a branch downtown. You can take your soil there as well. They're very easily contacted by phone or by email, you guys. They, again, a wealth of information, especially if you are growing vegetables. The UT Extension Service, who also heads up the Master Gardeners Association. Ideal amount of organic soil amendment is 25 to 50% by volume. I personally take it at about 25%. So with my organic materials, of course, that's just a rule of thumb that I use, but it's contingent upon how heavy that clay is. 50% probably works just great. So basically what I do is I mix mine in a wheelbarrow and just, if I'm amending by the hull. I'd like for you to also understand that if your budget doesn't call for it, you just simply don't want to do an entire garden at one time in regard to amending, you can amend by the hull. A hull, basically, say if this is your container, I take it no less than 6 inches out from my root wall. We're going to talk about today the soil that's already in the planter and how we're going to amend. There we go, right there, you guys. That is the earth mix that I brought in. I'm working with a quality soil though, and still amending. I think that what takes you from a good gardener to an excellent gardener is constantly, consistently manipulating the soil. Not testing it all the time, but as the environmental conditions change within the area that you're gardening in, I manipulate the soil all the time. That soil, we're going to talk about the size hole that we should plant for the azalea, and we're going to talk about keeping it from being stressed once you planted and stepped away for a week. So start with the soil. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is look at what we have. And the reason I want to show this is because the soil is like blood to the body. The soil is everything. This is a really good soil. The way we can tell is by the brown color. It also breaks up very easily, even though it's slightly moist. But because we are growing azaleas and because they love a rich, humid soil, we're going to add in or amend it with earth mix from Bates Nursery right here in Nashville, Tennessee. It's on off Briley Parkway and Whites Creek Pike. This is called earth mix, and it comes from river bottom topsoil. It has a heavy concentration of mushroom compost. It has soil conditioner. It has peat moss. It has gypsum. It has lime. It has everything you need for the soil to feed the plant naturally, so you don't have to put a lot of chemicals in it. But the biggest thing is that they can retain moisture and have drainage at the same time. So that is a key point in soil. You want your soil to be able to retain moisture and drain at the same time. One of the things that my buddy David likes to say is, as important as it is for the soil to retain moisture, a drying period, right David, is equally as important. Because I want to leave about this much from the top when I have it completely in a hole. So I'm going to put some more. I'm going to stop right there. Every gardener has a different take on that. I personally follow the rules that are on the tag in regard to how deep I plant my materials. It basically says to leave about the top inch, if you see on a tag, especially a Monrovia tag. It will say to leave the top inch. Primarily, the reason for that is because you're leaving space for your mulch. I think I'm going to just let that sit and soak because I want it to be completely saturated before I backfill it all the way to the top. Okay, so basically what we've done is we've lined them all up. I'm no stress pretty much when it comes to measuring. Your basic measurements between shrubs would be approximately 3 feet, and a shovel from the tip to where the middle starts is roughly that. So usually that's what I will measure out with. And as you see from base to base, there from the tip of the shovel to where the middle starts, I'm going to cover them up, backfill them completely, and then I am going to water them again. We've shown how to amend the soil. We have shown how to water in the plant. The next time we come back with these azaleas, we will have them in full bloom. They're orange, they're beautiful. We are going to, at that time, pine straw them. So you can see the color of the bloom with the burgundy leaf, with the orange-brown pine straw, and the textures and colors bouncing off of each other. Again, I am Master Gardener Kim Bradley. I am in Zone 6B, Nashville, Tennessee. We will see you next time.